Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Data is Love. I'm Aparna, and I am super excited to continue the theme that we've been exploring for the last couple of weeks, which is what data do we need to make better choices around people and culture and wellness in the workplace, but I think in particular in small mid-sized companies where most of us go to work, right? Like we're not all working for giant Fortune 500s. And so I'm super excited to welcome my friend and co-conspirator, Desiree Morton, who I'm actually going to ask you to introduce yourself because you're brilliant. And I think we need to hear you brag for a second.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that cue. I was just thinking, I was like, we need like a little like cheer track. Woo! I'm Desiree Morton, and I am a DEI practitioner, kind of across tech and higher ed for the last 10 years, and recently pivoted to become a tech co-founder with my life partner and now business partner. And so we're building a couple of different platforms. One is called Visibly, and it connects coaches, professional coaches, and subject matter experts who center the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus lived experiences with professionals at all levels. And then the second one is called Agency. And so Agency is a B2B equitable perks platform. We work with companies to provide agency to their employees in choosing what kind of perks that they need. And again, really centering those marginalized lived experiences.
Okay,
I live in
that's
Atlanta. I have a dog. I have two dogs now. I just got a puppy, so I have two dogs and three kids. Those are the
and
fun
you've
stories.
got twins, which is madness, right?
Yes, I made
Really
two at
little.
once.
You made two at once. And it's not like a buy one get one free deal. It's like it's a lot of work.
Yes, I'm a
Okay.
referee in my spare time of 3-year-old conflicts, and yes, that is a fun job to have, and it changes every year as they get older.
There's a part of me that wants to say that like that's actually really great lived experience for handling equity and inclusion challenges in the workplace because I feel like our colleagues sometimes behave like toddlers that need to be refereed.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of like fairness and like some justice. We actually practice some restorative justice with our twins. So, when one harms the other, asking the harmed twin kind of what he needs to feel better and to feel safe, in the instances of physical harm. So yeah, I mean, I definitely bring that work, home, and some of our colleagues do mirror that activity more closely than they might realize at times, and it's definitely good to kind of have that experience and just like, okay, we're gonna keep it chill and we're gonna get through this together. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so I think from the very first conversation we had, we're LinkedIn friends. We met via the internet. It's like Tinder for professionals, really. I feel like that actually should just be their tagline, LinkedIn,
That
Tinder
might
for
be.
professionals.
Yeah.
You've talked
Like
a
that.
lot about empowering people to ask for access, like what does it mean for employees to have agency? And I'm just really curious, right? Like what was your professional experience that made you say, not only like do I need this, but I'm going to go out and create products and services so that I can scale this business of like empowering people to ask for access and providing agency to employees. Was there a moment, an incident, a series of incidents that led you to this place?
Yeah. So actually at a previous company that I worked at, I was kind of the culture person, right? Just team of one, as is often the case. And I was working with a new employee resource group, and basically the employee resource group, like, through storytelling and sharing their personal stories with each other, as we built trust within the group, we started to see a lot of commonalities. And so, I had this idea of like, hey, let's go to, the people team and see if we can get access to some of the data that they might have,
Mhm.
to, kind of support this and dig a little bit deeper together. And
Yeah.
the response that we got was very guarded. Um, and it was very much like, oh, okay, like let's write out a script about like what the reaction will be, and then come to this resource group meeting. And I was just like, I was so confused by it. I didn't expect it. I was on the people team myself, but was obviously not in a senior role, and so I was really like kind of surprised by that. And I think from there, kind of encouraged the group to put those stories together and kind of come up with their own, data set and story that they could then share. Got some pushback on that, and it was just like, this is strange. Like, how can this resource group or these employees self advocate and get what they need from the workplace if they can't even get access to their own stories. Essentially, they can't get access to their stories being told back to them, in
Mm.
an anonymous and more solid numerical form. So yeah, it was really frustrating, and I think that really kind of lit a fire for me. This needs to change, and folks need and deserve access to to their own information in a lot of cases.
Yeah. You said the response that we got was very guarded. And I feel like often when you go to HR and you're like, hi, I'm really curious about what people's experiences are. And would you be willing to share that with us so that we can make programmatic decisions? It's almost like you're asking, Pepsi for their recipe. You're
Yeah,
like, hi, Pepsi, would you like to make this open source so we can all make our own sodas? And they're like, that's a hard pass. No, we will
exactly.
not, right? It almost feels like that.
Yeah, and
And
alarm
yet,
bells go off, and it's like now everyone's involved. I'm just like, what? Like, what's happening? And I feel like the weirdest part about that is like, having been kind of that bridge when that happens, the folks who were in that resource group before didn't have. They kind of had unfounded trust issues. Like, they were like, I don't really know, like I don't really feel good about what's going
mhm,
on here. But that was so like red flags, right? Like, oh, they won't give it to us. So then it turns into, well, what are they hiding from us? Why won't they give it to us? What's there that they don't want us to see? And so I'm not even sure that that was like the case, right? That there was something so bad that
bad.
the HR team didn't want them to see, but that is like the immediate kind of inference that someone makes in that situation. So then it got worse, and yeah, it's like adding gasoline to the fire to then start to hide the data actively, and yeah, and get that like very scripted response. It really ruins trust if you had any to begin with.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, before they were unfounded trust issues and maybe it's like the run of the mill, right? Like
Yeah.
what's the employer-employee relationship, and some of the trust issues just come from power dynamics
Hmm.
that exist. But then the minute that you're like, oh, I won't tell you, right? I think it's like, are you cheating on me? Like,
Yeah.
what don't I know? Why don't I
Why
have
won't you give
access
me
to
the
your
phone?
account? Why
Yeah.
won't you give me the phone? Why won't
Yeah.
And I don't know, there
Absolutely.
might be people listening that are like, well, I would never share my phone password. And I'm like, I don't even know what my phone password is. Is it unlocked? Hard to know. Hard to know. My computer password was 1, 2, 3, 4 for years.
I'm glad it's no
Um,
longer that, because this would be
and
not a good place to share it.
I too am glad that it's no longer that. I have been forced into compliance, shall
There
we
you go.
say. So what does right, we know that people crave transparency, and I think that generationally that's shifting really fast, and it's shifting really
Mhm.
dramatically. I feel like transparency, it has become a currency of sorts in organizations, and it seems to be really deeply connected to trust.
Mm-hmm.
right? Will you share pay bands? Will you share what's the demographic makeup of our organization? Will you share X? Will you share Y? Um, when you think about empowering people to ask for access of this data, right, which is essentially like who are we and how do we experience this company? What what do you want? What do you want employees to know, and how do you want employees to ask for it?
Mm, that's a good question. I think the thing that I want employees to know is that once you join a company, uh, in the I would say like in the ideal scenario or in the right scenario, you then are a part of that company's culture. You are creating culture by being there. You are creating inclusion for your colleagues by even existing in spaces, asking questions, and requiring or requesting more from your organization. And so
Mhm.
with that in mind, like I think the ask for data transparency, even if it's only you, and I would say like ideally if you have a group like an ERG or someone that you're working with, kind of banding together to like put the request in from more than one person, tends to tends to get more response in my experience. But even if it's only you, starting that ask and then knowing or talking to other people about the ask. Hey, have you seen, we did that survey 3 months ago. Did you see the results? I didn't get to see them. Just kind of chatting about it and naming that, that this is something that folks can expect. You're then creating a culture that holds your company to a higher standard, right? And so I think just like that piece of knowing that you have that power as an employee, even if you don't have the power to kind of, to demand or, the systemic power to provide the transparency yourself, you can raise the expectation by kind of making the request and doing so, in a way that you feel safe, but then also trying to kind of mobilize your teammates too. And then in terms of like how to ask or what to ask for, I think we hear so often, or even see, in the DEI reports and stuff, DEI is all of our jobs. We're all creating a culture of inclusion. We're all creating this culture together. And so I think that's a really good door, honestly, to kind of say, hey, author of this report, or person who went live on LinkedIn or whoever. I noticed that you said we're all, creating this culture of inclusion. I would like to be more deliberate about how
Mhm.
we're creating this culture of inclusion. Can you share with me, some of the data that's informing, our work here, and how we should all be contributing to this, creation and elevation of our culture? And I think that then, kind of challenges a little bit, but um, without it seeming like, why are you seeking this data? You're seeking this data because,
Mhm.
the company has told you that this is something you should be thinking about. So you're thinking about it, you're doing
Mhm.
what they asked you to do.
I love this phrase. We're all part of creating this culture, and I would like to be more deliberate. I as a leader am interested in being more intentional.
Mm,
I love
mhm,
this framing. Like, what a
mhm.
powerful framing. It's almost like you're saying to your employer, "Hey, I want to do extra credit.
Yeah,
I want to do extra credit." And who doesn't like that? Who doesn't like the student who like sits in the front of the classroom and is like, me, assign me extra work? But it's
yeah.
not assign me extra work. It's like a really strategic way of asking for more information. Um, and I can totally see, you know where I'm going with this. I
Mm-hmm.
can totally see some some people taking it in the wrong direction,
Mm,
weaponizing the information, um, right? And
mhm,
in particular, I think about like our white het cis colleagues, then also coming to Black and Brown people, to queer people, to people with disabilities on their teams and saying, hey, like, how come you're having a bad experience? Tell
mm,
me more. And doing so in a way. that is that's going to harm that individual who's already a minority and probably a very visible minority in their organization. And so how do we start to safeguard against that, or what does it look like to put some buffers around people who don't have a nuanced understanding of equity and inclusion and can cause real harm when this data is in their hands, even if they want to be intentional.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I think so. I will say, like in my last organization, the data sharing practice that I really appreciated the most was that we, kind of disaggregated our data into different groups, and then we went to those ERGs that were associated
Mm-hmm.
with those identities and had a conversation with them, right? And so, as opposed to, the managers got the data too to a certain degree. It's the if it's fewer than a certain number of people that identify within a group, you can't see those specific numbers, so that you can't start to kind of pick out the one people on the team, or the individual folks on the team. But we went to our Black African American ERG and said, hey, like, let's look at this data together. Let's look at the good, the bad, the kind of areas where folks shared that we had to grow. Let's look at it, and talk about some of
Mm-hmm.
these gaps, and what we think we're seeing here. And it was actually super interesting because what ended up coming out of it was like this very much a brain share and agency, right? So folks were talking about their own needs as a community, and then we're able to share that with executive sponsor and leadership. And so instead of saying, you have the data, you kind of infer from it whatever you want and
Mm-hmm.
make decisions on our behalf. No, now we have the power over our own data. As marginalized folks, we can see it, we can discuss it, we can talk about what we were thinking about when we answered that question, or how we interpreted it, and then we can come up with even a fuller picture than of what we think we need or what we feel we need, and
Yeah.
get that agency. So I think that is important, like kind of taking it directly. And then the second part is, on a more holistic picture, just being really careful about not getting too small, which I think is more difficult, definitely for smaller organizations.
Yeah. So let's switch gears just a teeny tiny bit, right?
Cool.
About around company size. And one place where this data is really useful, I think when people think of, DEI data, they're thinking about like, do you feel a sense of belonging? Which to me is like the most garbage question to ask any person, because it offers you no insight. You already know this. And I think
Yep.
we're on the same page about this, right?
Yeah.
But one of the places where the data is really useful is what in identifying like what are the needs of specific groups
Yep.
inside of an organization, especially when we start thinking about rewards, perks, benefits, whatever language you want to use to describe, right? And that has been the basis for you to kind of like build a product for
Yeah.
small and mid-sized companies. And I'm really curious, like, what are the perks that people of color want? What are the perks that like queer employees want that the mainstream world of HR, which is a lot of white people and a lot of like straight white women, are
Mm-hmm.
not thinking about? What are
Mm-hmm.
like, because you have access to data inside of companies, right? And you're
Yep.
designing a product based on that. What don't we know?
Yeah. So I think the approach to build inclusion has been to train up the manager to be inclusive and to like kind of play all of these roles, coach, mentor, sponsor, all
Mhm.
of these roles for everyone on their teams. And I think that is great. We can keep moving in that direction. And not okay. I saw the eyebrow thing. Not great, but like I think it's a worthwhile
Yeah.
endeavor to train managers to
Yes.
be more inclusive. And that cannot be all. So,
Mhm.
what I am seeing and what we've built agency around is this concept that employees need more. They need someone who can see them and can, hear them and relate to their lived experiences, and someone who they know there's not this like power differential with, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um where I started was that this is coaching, right? This is professional coaching. This is having a coach who mirrors your experiences in some way
Yeah.
that's important to you, and that is there alongside you to kind of talk through the things that you're spinning your wheels on,
Yeah.
before you go to your manager for support, or even
Mm-hmm.
alongside that kind of manager
Yeah.
support that you're getting. And so that's where we started, and then you were like, oh, okay, well, like, coaching is great. We cannot be equitable, to everyone. We can't serve everyone, in this way, because not
Yeah.
everyone needs this exact thing in this exact moment. And so that's where we kind of branched out with agency, and started working with other companies that are super laser focused on specific identity groups and serving them, with things like
Mm-hmm.
with other types of perks as well, to really support employees at all levels and give them the power to decide what they need to thrive.
So what are some of the like what are the kinds of perks that you're building into your marketplace that might be completely like not even on the radar of a run-of-the-mill HR practitioner?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a ton of different types of perks,
Yeah.
that we're reaching out to, and I don't want to drop specific names, so I'm trying to think of like how I can be as descriptive as possible without naming potential partners. But I mean, things like legal services that are
Mm,
targeted to specific identity groups. So maybe legal services that you can reach out to, if you are, worried about police stops. That is a service,
mhm,
or legal services that you could reach out to in the case of having an immigration issue. Can you use employee perks dollars for that specifically?
mm,
Similarly, caregiver money or caregiver perks,
yeah,
right, are typically children, or and now I think maybe some furry caregiving things, but there's also like people who are taking
mhm,
care of their parents or elders in their families. And we know that specifically, within certain cultural groups, that's a lot more the norm. And so how can, we support an employee who might be caregiving someone elderly, or even going through a grieving process and needing support in that way? So these are the kinds of perks that I think are like, a little bit, I mean, they're very niche, right? And that's the point, of creating equity, is that you are able to provide those niche resources when someone needs them, and have them kind of on hand, really easily accessible for them to access in the moments that that they're looking for them.
yeah. I think that I mean the point that you like. I'm just thinking of when I was in my 20s and I've never had kids, so I've never accessed paid family and medical leave, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, like it's generally only available to a birthing parent. If you're in an uber duper, progressive company or a company that's large enough in the right state, you might get it for other reasons. But I remember this moment where I had a colleague that had essentially Irish twins. They
Mm,
were pregnant 2 years in a row and had two kids, which sounds exhausting to me personally. And the group of colleagues that were really upset with this individual going on mat leave 2 years in a row
mm,
was actually people that were having to take care of their parents.
mm,
Right? That
mhm,
was the group that had a real because I think like other folks that were like in my age group were like, well, we're not gonna have feelings about this because we're probably gonna have kids of our own. And of course we're not getting down on a colleague that's having a baby, right? But
right.
it was the older folks, and it was really interesting because they'd come into their careers at a time when there was no protected leave
Mm,
specifically for people that gave birth to humans. right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, not only have they like pushed through and built careers at that time, but now they were having to take care of their parents and the complexities of, senior care, whether you're
Yep.
organizing it or doing it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a perk or a benefit that an employer can have that cuts across all racial groups, all gender groups, right? Like
Yep.
you're likely to have a parent who is likely to need care at some point in the future. I There's another example that kind of like stands out to me of it. Um, a mid-sized company in Seattle that provided a clothing rental subscription
Mm.
to its sort of senior women leaders that were kind of evangelists, right? They were being sent to conferences, they were on the stage a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
to be dressed well. Are these the kinds of things that you're building agency around?
Yes, these are the kinds of things, and I think, expanding them, right? So, saying, okay, like there have been these, fringe benefits or kind of extra services that sometimes are available to the senior most leaders within an organization, things like, coaches, public speaking coaches, etc.
Yeah.
Um, and we could, subscribe that and say, or prescribe that and say, everyone in the company should have access to this one thing. But I
Mm-hmm.
actually don't think that that is the equitable solution. I think the
Yeah.
equitable solution is to say everyone in the company should have access to the same things, and then they can, decide what they need based on what they know about
Mm-hmm.
themselves, because they know themselves, better than you do as the HR person, better than I do as the founder of this company. They know themselves, and so
Yeah.
our goal is really to provide as expansive an experience as possible for those employees to then be able to say, this is what I want and need this year. Next year it might be something completely different. That's cool, we'll worry about that then, but right now I want this, let's put my money towards it. I earned it from my employer. This perk is gonna change my life in measurable ways.
I'm curious, what do you say to an HR leader in a company with 700 employees
Mm-hmm.
who's like, no, I don't want to do it. Too many
Mm-hmm.
requests from too many people, too many things for me to figure out.
Yep. Yeah, I say let us do it. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the gist of it, right? Is that you are signing up with agency, and we are your one stop kind of portal to these other organizations that are doing it. And so, the idea here is that we're doing that work for you, and then we're sharing the data back with you, at an anonymized high level to say like this is the utilization, this is how your employees are using these perks, and then this is the impact that we're having on your belonging within the organization, your engagement. And so, yeah, that's my answer to that is let us do it. It's my pleasure. I love working directly with marginalized employees who have those niche needs and wants.
Outsource it.
Yeah, outsource it, ship it. Let's go.
Can I just make a personal request for you
Yes.
to have like a perimenopause vendor?
Mm,
Because literally, some of us are dying of hot flashes. Not literally, but
yeah.
it's very uncomfortable to
Mm,
experience hot flashes all day long. And
mhm,
all of the other crazy things that happen. And right, like, right as women, we're like, I'm hitting my stride. Like, I'm in a good place. I figured stuff out. And then you're
mm,
like, oh, and I also sweat every night for reasons that cannot be explained or can, but I don't have access to that care specifically.
mm.
So that's my
Yes.
small request
I take your small
for,
request and I appreciate it and add it. It's actually on the list. There's some cool businesses out there doing that work. Yeah,
oh my gosh. All right. Me will be also signing up for agency.
love it.
Okay. I have some really great advice, right? Like just like my favorites have been like, I'd like to be more deliberate. Can you share information that helps me do that, right? Outsourcing some really specialized tasks, especially for
Mhm.
small and mid-sized employers, because let's be real, you're not going to create a, head count, like an opening that's going to manage for these kinds of things. Sharing as a, like, right, being transparent as a way to build um trust.
Yeah.
Anything else, like anything from like your decade plus experience doing this work, right, that people need to know about?
Mm.
How do I activate my peers? And I guess in particular, like, how do I activate my peers who are part of the status quo group? Like, they're not experiencing the pain,
Mhm.
right? How do I activate
Mhm.
them?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone's experiencing some pain, right? And so
Mm,
it's an interesting question to ask, and I think uh, that we can start by sharing our stories and telling and being like transparent about where we are in our own journeys, right? So I feel like a lot of times folks are so afraid to say the wrong thing that they just don't say anything, where you can actually start by saying, hey, I'm not sure exactly how to start this conversation, but I want to have it. I want to share with you that this is a goal that I have. This is the type of leader that I'm looking to become. I want to be inclusive. I want to be, thoughtful and equitable. I'm not asking for you to help me. I'm just, asking for you to hold me accountable, and tell me when
mhm.
I'm not behaving in the way that I intend to. And so I think that's one way. And then I think when that happens, when you kind of say like, I don't exactly know what I'm doing here,
Yeah.
help me be accountable, then you can ask the other person, how can I help you be accountable? Like, what is it that you are working towards? And I think that really does kind of open up the door for that person to then, like I said, kind of share their pain points with you and engage them in a way that that they're able to be honest with you about their pain and about the things that they don't understand, which I think are a lot of times more numerous than we can even realize.
Oh, that is a ninja skill, the ask and offer. And right?
Yep.
I'm not just going to keep asking. I'm also going to offer to do something. I'm going to recognize that you have a pain point or a lack of lived experience. I can fill the gap for you. I love an ask and offer. Um, Even though
Yeah.
it can feel really transactional, right? Like it's like, hey, Desiree, like come talk to our peers about how to craft like a really great employee experience. And here's what right? Like it's like, no, it feels transactional, but it actually is the thing that makes people feel connected
Hmm.
because
And they
they
feel seen. They feel like, oh, okay, like you want this is mutual. I have something to give you too. You recognize the
mm,
value in me by asking for something, but then there's also this value of you're offering me something in return.
yeah.
And it really is kind of just like human nature to then that forges a connection, and a mutual relationship that you probably haven't had before. Yeah.
A mutual relationship that you haven't had before. Okay, that is a perfect place for us to wrap. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me. Um, I'm going to invite everybody that is listening or has tuned in to connect with you on LinkedIn. You're active on LinkedIn. You have like
Mhm.
these like daily gems or like sometimes even things that make me cackle out loud in meetings, which like I probably shouldn't be browsing LinkedIn when I'm in a meeting.
True.
Um,
Not
right,
my
but a lot.
LinkedIn, at least. No, not while you're in a meeting.
No, this is true. No multitasking. Connecting with you, and then we're gonna pop some links to Visibly and Agency in the comments as well. So talk to you, right? Like, is
Yeah.
this we yeah, go talk
Yeah.
to her. Go talk to
Come
her.
talk
She's
to me.
a wealth of information. And guess what? Like the things that you're building, a lot of people actually need them.
Mm.
they're needed. So
Mhm.
thanks for joining, folks, today, and have a great week. And Desiree, thank you for saying yes to being a guest.
Yeah. Thank you for asking and thank you for having me. And I can't wait to talk to folks. Like I'm very friendly. I am a little spicy sometimes on LinkedIn. So there's that. But you come talk to me. I'm great.
Just a little bit, right? But I think that comes with the territory of being a mom to twins
And telling the truth, you know?
and telling the truth. All right,
Yeah.
folks. Thank you. See you next week.